for asexuality, people have such a Sheldon Cooper-esque visual image. They kind of assume like not just your aesthetic or your like age or your race or whatever, but also your personality type. Dude, I'm in an old girls' school. We get changed together. If I was a lesbian, I would have known by now. I think that when you kind of reach a social point of being like so anonymous and like invisible, it kind of gives you a lot of leeway to do whatever you want. You wouldn't guess someone's entire personality, life history, childhood, future aspirations, all those things based on them being a lesbian, but you would about someone being like asexual. Seeing the rest of queer culture like change and grow in conversations and like intersectionality and all these other things. And asexuality has just been in this Groundhog Days for like 100 years. And I'm like, someone has to say something else. So let me just do it.
Hello and welcome back to the queerest podcast telling the fiercest stories. This is Queer Talker and I'm Ben Cicchetti. This week, I sit down with asexual activist and model Yasmin Benoit. But before we get to that conversation, I've got a very quick favor to ask. Wherever you are watching or listening to this episode, hit that subscribe button. It's one click and it's going to make a massive difference. It's going to allow me to grow this podcast and it's going to allow me to bring you the best and the queerest episodes every single time. So in advance, thank you. Now to my conversation with Yasmin. Right, Yasmin, let's jump straight in and we're going to jump to our queer panic round. And the first question is, what was the first album you ever owned?
I am pretty sure that it was Let Go by Avril Lavigne, like her first album in like 2001.
Amazing. Amazing. Skater Boy, all of that. That's great.
Yes.
Okay, well, if you had to lip sync for your life, what song would you choose?
I always like my karaoke song is usually Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. So I feel like that would have to be my lip sync for my life song.
That would be epic. I'm not sure I've ever seen that lip sync, so I feel like that would be really
people
epic.
tend to choose rock songs, but I feel like that would be really fun.
Bring the vibe. I can totally see it. What is your favorite queer movie or TV show?
I mean, this is a very basic choice, but just based on how many I've consumed, it probably has to be RuPaul's Drag Race in terms of hours I've put into following the season.
Yeah, the seasons, the different countries, all stars, all of it. I feel it. Who is your ultimate queer icon?
It is a man who's actually on the poster that's like to my left, which is Sir Ian McKellen, because I grew up obsessed with X-Men and Lord of the Rings and was very excited to realize who the actor was and like what he actually stood for and like what he's done. So he's been like my queer icon ever since.
Yeah, I feel that. He's such an icon. He's such a national treasure and kind of what he's done for the queer community, but also for bringing such incredible mediums to life, right? X-Men and Lord of the Rings. Who gets to be involved in two such iconic things? It's
Exactly.
amazing. And then maybe other than Ian McKellen, maybe, who is one person you would like to hear on this podcast?
I would probably have to go for someone who I'm sure you probably have crossed paths with before. Like Charlie Craggs is so funny. And every interview she gives is so iconic. I feel like that would be like a really fun person to hear from.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. Well, I will slide into their DMs and see if we can get them on the podcast. And then finally, what is one word you would use to describe your childhood?
I would say probably like sentimental. I'm like very sentimentally attached to my childhood because I feel like it was good. and I'm one of those people that's like just so nostalgia based because I enjoyed it. So I reflect on it fondly.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's dig into that a little bit more because as listeners know, I have this theory about understanding someone as a young person to understand them as an adult. And we all like to consider ourselves adults at this point, I guess, unfortunately. So you say sentimental. So what should I know about you as a young person, child, teenager, to understand the Yasmin that sits in front of me today?
Probably that. I mean, to be honest, I was like a very odd kid. I feel like I've had the same energy my whole life. Like as a kid, I was like a huge, again, X-Men fan, Lord of the Rings fan, WWE fan, like rock and metal fan. Like I had Green Day pictures all over my room. Like American Idiot was like my Bible. I was just very much like marching to the beat of my own drum, which my family very much let me do, but it was not like it didn't make me very popular at school. But I was very, like, resistant to conformity and,
Mm.
like, mending myself to make myself more popular and make friends. So I was very much just, like, rebelliously, like, lone wolfing it to a counterproductive degree, like, well into college. Like, I
Okay.
didn't people didn't start to think I was cool until, like, adulthood.
So what was it then, we all talk about that kind of nostalgic feeling. What kind of was the nostalgia for you, and kind of why do you have such a sentimental attachment to kind of your younger self?
I think just because well, partially, I think it's because 'cause I've always, like, lived in the same place my whole life. So I can
Mm.
which I feel like is kind of unusual. So I have, like, constant reminders of the past around me all the time, and I also have a weirdly good memory, so I can remember, like, being in a buggy and being a toddler. So I, like, constantly just
Ah.
have, like, random memories come back to me and be like, "Oh, I remember when I was 2 and this thing happened." So I think that has something to do with it. And then also, cause like, I feel like my younger self would be very impressed with me, and I'm, like, always thinking, like, "Will my younger self think this was cool?" And she
Yeah.
absolutely would. Like, I enjoy being able to satisfy my inner child.
Yeah. I love that. I love the phrase, "Be the person you needed when you were younger." So
Yeah.
I kind of feel like you're doing that for yourself, which is very, very cool. So if you take yourself back to that time then, do you remember the first LGBTQ plus person you kind of became aware of and how that felt in yourself?
You know what? It's weird because when I think about it, and the only reason this came to me recently is because there's been all that stuff about America's Next Top Model. And now I think about it because I feel like that show didn't get the credit for like the representation side of things. So I was thinking before Drag Race, it probably was
Yeah.
actually that show because I used to watch that as a kid, like seeing like Isis King and like Miss J and like people like that. I think they were probably the first like black queer people that I actually saw on TV, like, before RuPaul's Drag Race became popular. Like, I definitely saw, like, white queer people, but yeah, that was, like, the first black ones I think that I ever saw.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and we will definitely get to kind of the intersectionality of it, because I think it's so interesting how there are so many different components to our personalities and obviously and our identities. And obviously for you, and I'm so curious to jump into this because for our listeners who might not be familiar with it or might have confusion around it or just haven't got as much exposure, because I don't think it gets as much mainstream representation, and you can obviously educate me on this as well, like about the representation. But how do you personally define asexuality?
Yeah, so asexuality just means when you experience little to no sexual attraction towards anyone, regardless of their gender. So it's a type of sexual orientation, but kind of in the way that it isn't necessarily oriented anywhere. So, when some people kind of wanna be like, "Well, is that actually a sexual orientation then?" And I'm like, "Well, in the same way as black is a color, if you wanna take it that way." So
Yeah. And I'm curious then for, so for some of our listeners who might be listening and might, I guess, be wondering if they relate to what you're describing, how would you explain the difference between asexuality and then things like libido and sex drive that I feel like there's a lot of kind of confusion and convolution around?
yeah, well, I mean, there are people that are straight or gay or bi or whatever, and they might go through a slump. They might have a dry spell. They might have, I don't know, be on medication that impacts their libido. It doesn't stop them from being gay. It doesn't
Yeah.
stop them
Yeah.
from being straight. And then vice versa. Like, I don't experience sexual attraction towards anyone, but I would say my libido was like very average to high half the time. So it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to anybody in order to have a sexuality, if you think about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then I'm curious for you, like, because as I just said, and you let me know if I'm incorrect in this, but it feels like asexuality just doesn't get as much representation in mainstream press. I know there has been some more recently and media, and a lot of us kind of learn to identify ourselves through things we see when we're younger, through representation we see in TV or movie, or books or whatever it might be. So I'm curious when you first became or came across the term asexual and what that moment felt like you, and did it kind of immediately resonate or did it take time to kind of recognize that in yourself?
It was kind of a combination. So I, as the one who was a teenager in like the 2010s, it was kind of like, well, I say it was the peak Tumblr era. People older than me say actually it was not. But it was when Tumblr was still like pretty popular. And I went to like a
Yeah.
very bi-curious all-girls school where our school reunions are like at Pride to this day.
Okay.
So it was kind of like people were like, it was pretty cool to have like a niche orientation thing, especially in my social circle, which was all of like the emo kids. So everyone was pretty bi coded anyway. And yeah, so it was actually other people kind of suggesting it to me because I just wasn't giving anything, and it was very, very
Right.
obvious, and it was, like, a popular hobby in my, like, year group to kind of come up with theories as to, like, what my deal was, and, yeah, so someone kinda suggested it to me, and then I went down, like, a little internet rabbit hole, and I was like, terminology-wise, yes, it fits. Usefulness-wise, not really, because
Mm,
no one knew what it meant outside of, like, a very particular niche of people. So what's kind of the
yeah.
point in having a term that it doesn't mean anything? Um, Everyone I saw on the internet were white teenagers. So I was like, seems very niche, bit too niche, I
Yeah.
would say, in terms of, like, who was identifying as asexual. And then I then couldn't use the word because then when I tried to use it, people were like, well, you don't look asexual because they're also thinking of blue-haired, white, awkward teenager cliché.
Right.
So, me being like a black girl, it just wasn't fitting. So, I was like, "Okay, I feel like this is the right word, but also I can't really use it or embrace it properly." And it was again, it was so niche, like, it was like, it's not in the curriculum, it wasn't on TV, it wasn't in anything, so I was kind of like, "How do I even know this is legit? How do I know that, like,
Yeah.
some kid on Tumblr didn't just make it up?" So, I literally didn't really use the word, even though I kind of knew that's what I was.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I'm curious to pick on something you just said, which was you mentioned that people kind of that it became a hobby of people to kind of try and quote unquote guess what your deal was. How did that feel though? Because you are obviously trying to explore yourself. You're trying to identify how you are feeling and how you identify. To have everyone kind of like quote unquote trying to figure it out for you. Like how did that feel? And did you think that kind of slowed the process down? Did it kind of speed the process up because you felt like this pressure to figure out your deal?
I mean, I think it sped it up, so in hindsight, while it wasn't enjoyable, I'm kinda
Mm.
glad that people would just not get off my back and were, like, annoying, because it did like, there are lots of people that don't realize or don't discover these things until they're, like, in their 30s or 40s or whatever, but because
Yeah.
people were so freaking obsessed and, like, wouldn't leave me alone, it meant that in hindsight, it did speed up the process. But, yeah, it was annoying at the time because the assumptions people were making were not positive assumptions, and even after I found the word, they were not positive assumptions. I mean, well, one of them that wasn't necessarily negative was just like, "Oh, she's gay." Like, people just assumed I was,
Mm.
like, gay and would, like there was this song by this band who I do not remember their name, but they were, like, popular on YouTube at the time, but they had this song that was like, "Oh, that girl, she must be a lesbian." People would just sing that to me every freaking time I came into, like, my student
Oh
area
wow.
because everyone was, like, convinced I was a lesbian, and I was like, "Dude, I'm in an old girls' school, we get changed together. If I was a lesbian, I would have known by now." Like
Yeah.
like, come on. There's options everywhere, like, I would just be a lesbian if that's what this was, like, but yeah, so it was weird because also, yeah, people were just like, "Oh, there must be something kinda, like, wrong with her, like,
Mm.
is she traumatized? Did she get abused as a kid? Is she stunted?" Like, those were kinda, like, the overarching ones that people would just casually say to me, and so even after I, like, had the term, people still were like, "Oh, no, you're not. You're probably just this," and then I was like, "You know
Yeah.
what? I'm just, like, never mentioning this again," which obviously I ended up mentioning it again, but I did actually spend many years, like, dodging it.
And when do you think you stopped kind of quote unquote dodging it? So when did you start to feel authentically yourself, authentically identify with asexuality? And when then do you feel like you could just bring that? Because obviously what you do today is you're bringing that to the world and you're helping educate, you're helping to kind of bring that kind of representation so powerfully. When did you feel comfortable doing that?
It was pretty much when I was out of school and, like, no one could bother me anymore. It was like yeah, I feel like I was in uni at that point, and at uni, I was very much one of those kids that just did the work and went home. I was not communicating with people, I was not, like, that interactive, so I was pretty anonymous, and I think that when you kind of reach a social point of being, like, so anonymous and, like, invisible, it kinda gives you a lot of leeway to do whatever you want, as, like, chaotic as it is, because it's like, well, what's anybody gonna do about it? So that's when I was, like, modeling, and I was building up my own, like, online platform because I was like, "No one in my personal life notices, so I can do whatever I want." And then that was when I was like, "Oh, and let me just throw this in there because the algorithm just kept showing me asexual related things as it does because it always knows, and they were just really basic, and, like, I was like, "This is exactly the same stuff I saw when I was, like, 14. How is this not progressed?" Like, I'm seeing the rest of queer culture, like, change and grow and conversations and like intersectionality and all these other things. And asexuality has just been in this groundhog days for like 100 years. And I'm like, someone has to say something else. So let me just do it.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things you have spoken about is kind of these preconceived ideas that people have about how asexual people, quote unquote, look or present. And I suspect even some of the people listening to this podcast might have some of those own assumptions in their heads. So, what do you kind of wish people listening truly understood about asexuality and those kind of confusions and preconceived ideas that people have?
I think it all comes down to people just like not taking it for what it is. I think people
Mm,
don't see it as a sexual orientation in the same way as they do the others. Like most people, I would hope at this point wouldn't be like, "Oh, you don't look like a gay man." Or I mean, I'm sure
yeah.
people probably still do say those kind of things, but I feel like a lot of the time people would be kind of able to clock that that's a weird thing to say. Like, people wouldn't be, like, on the
Yeah.
basis of your race and be like, "Oh, you're gay? I didn't think so because 'cause you're black." Like, people wouldn't say that, but for
Yeah.
asexuality, people have such a Sheldon Cooper-esque visual image
Yes. That's
that
such a good way to put it.
they kind of assume, like, not just your aesthetic or your, like, age or your race or whatever, but also your personality type. Like,
Yeah.
people kind of take it as, like and also because a lot of our representation kind of plays into that of like the kind of awkward wallflower, like bookish, like doesn't really understand sexuality and is like very uncomfortable and squeamish and like very like twee about it. It's like that's
Yeah.
kind of like what we get. So I think that also kind of plays into it. But I'm just like, it's just a sexual orientation. It's like it's one aspect of a person that people kind of incorporate, like, oh, so your social views must be like this, and you must be like really chaste and anti-sex and squeamish and all of these other things that people encompass into it. Whereas I'm like, you wouldn't guess someone's entire personality, life history, childhood, future aspirations, all those things based on them being a lesbian. But you would
Yeah.
for about someone being like asexual. So I'm just like, just take it as an orientation.
Yeah. And I think some of that totally comes down to kind of the representation we talked about. Like there has been such a growth in representation of so many parts of the LGBTQ plus community, but it feels like in many ways asexuality hasn't come on that same journey. Do you think awareness of asexuality is improving, or are we kind of still at the beginning of the journey? I mean, I can say for myself, I remember seeing obviously there's an asexual character now on Heartstopper, and it felt like for me that was one of, if not the first time I'd seen asexuality represented kind of in a mainstream show.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know, it's hard to say because I feel like we're in a very fragmented media era where things don't hit the way they used to hit. I think just in terms of like what was the word for like monoculture where, like, everyone was kind of tuned into the same things where it's like,
Yes.
like, a billion people saw the lesbian wedding on Friends back in the day, whereas unless you're a certain demographic, you're not watching Heartstopper realistically.
Yeah.
So, a lot of things kind of end up preaching to the converted, sort of, so I feel like on one hand, it's like we do have media and stuff aimed at very particular demographics that I think is becoming more inclusive, but I also don't feel like it's gotten outside of a very particular bubble, and I also feel like it's still stuck in a bit of a Groundhog Day where it's still very introductory. Like, I think that for asexual representation, we're where everyone else was in like the late 90s, where we have to play it so basic and so safe. And in that, like, our characters very much have to still kind of play into the cliches for people to find them palatable. Whereas for like every other community, it's like, hey, we could have a trans girl who's black or who's a sex worker or who's disabled or who's neurodiverse or like all we could put all these things in there and like, oh, and she can be messy and she can be in the drama, she can be in the storylines, and she can be doing this. Whereas for us, it's still very much like just drop an introductory sentence, sit in the background, don't offend anybody, keep it really, really basic, which I think is kind of why I've ended up being a controversial example of asexual representation, just because people are like, oh, I didn't see that one coming because we're used to the Sheldon Cooper thing. Like, that's kind of like the safe zone. And I think we're still
Yeah.
kind of stuck in that. So, on one hand, I feel like we do have, again, I think especially just like with the internet, information's more accessible, there are more examples of characters and stuff, but most of our asexual characters or books or anything that has that, it's very much the same archetype. And I'm like, I think we should have moved beyond it, but we're still very much stuck in that safe zone right now.
Yeah. And you said kind of controversial representation. What do you think it is about yourself that people feel is controversial?
Well, based on the comments, I can discern
Okay.
that my appearance is number one, which is
Mm,
not even specifically my clothing, it's my race as well, I've noticed, just based on the nature of the comments, because I can be, like, covered from, like, head to toe, and then it will be like, "Well, her lips are a bit or her eyes are a bit or her overall demeanor is giving," and I'm like, "Is it my demeanor? Or is it your
mm,
like or is it on you?" You know? So, yeah, I think appearance is definitely one thing, and I think also just that, like, I kind of have a very, like, I guess just by virtue of what, like, my modeling was separately, I was like, I'm kind of coming into this from a perspective that reads is very sex positive, like, I am a
yeah.
sex positive person in terms of my views, but, like, you can't really dodge it when it's like, "Oh, she's also, like, a lingerie model," so it's I think that is also, like, just, like, an angle people aren't really ready for because even, like, in documentaries and things like that, like, they try to represent asexual people as being, again, very squeamish. Like, there's, like, this kind of cliche scene that they did in a documentary I was part of, like, years ago, and I've been to other countries and seen that in their other countries' documentaries, they always have the same scene where they take an asexual person and they put them in a sex shop just to try and get them to, like, I don't know, burst into ball
Wow.
of flames or something, like thinking they'll be like vampires in the sun, like, just because they, like, assume that you're gonna be against that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So, for me to kind of immediately be like, "No, I'll write an article for Playboy, and yeah, I'll go for this place, and I'll do GQ, and I'll do all these things," people are kinda like, "Oh, I don't know what to do with that." And there are even some asexual people that are like, "Oh, we don't know what to do with that either," because
Okay.
we were kinda more comfortable with the more, like, chaste version of the representation. So, yeah, I feel like that's kind of a big part of why people are, like, a bit perplexed by me.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think you said something a little bit earlier on, and that I think it's so feels so accurate, which is this representation is kind of as like quote unquote gay representation was in the 90s, right? There was this representation that all gay men were incredibly flamboyant, incredibly camp, and we've managed to kind of push past that. And it feels like to what you've said, asexuality is still in that, quote unquote, I think it's such an interesting way to put it, quote unquote, Sheldon Cooper kind of stage of
Yeah.
they're just trying to put everyone in a single bucket, a single way of representing yourselves. And I think that's why it's so important that we do have, and you have become such a powerful voice across the asexual community, but across the LGBTQ plus community as a whole. When did you realize advocacy was something that you had within you, that you had a passion for, and also you had a talent for? Because you can have a passion for something and then not have a talent for it, but you've got such a keen and clear talent for it. When did all of that come together?
It was I mean, it was a surprise to me. I didn't really know. I didn't, because I mean, like, like, at university, I was studying crime science. I was assuming I was gonna be, like,
Wow.
doing something else. Like, it wasn't like
Yeah.
I wasn't, like, setting out for advocacy. I didn't even know anything about any of this. Like I wasn't again, like I was the kind of person that just like did the work and went home. Like I wasn't really on any kind of scene. My friends were not influencers. I didn't live in
Mm,
London. Like I was so like not in the bubble. I learned
yeah.
everything as I like went. And it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I kind of went from just, like, riding the wave to kind of realizing, like, let me steer it in different directions. Because I think a lot of the
Yeah.
interest in me initially was kind of shock value. Like, the media was kinda just like, "Ah, here's the, lingerie model that doesn't wanna have sex." Like, that was kinda like the
Right.
angle that they always went for, and I was like, "Well, while I've kinda got your attention," which is very unusual
Mm,
for, anything asexuality related, like, let me just see if we can poke it in a human rights direction or in like a kind of
mm.
different way. So it was kind of something that I just sort of fell into without really knowing anything about it. Like I didn't know that there were like LGBT award shows and like all these magazines and like this whole like sphere, I think especially like in London. Like I'd only been to London Pride once before I was like doing things in it. like like it was all like very kind of fresh for me. But yeah, after a while, I was like, I can't deny that I've got a knack for it because I'm managing to kind of make things happen that other people haven't really been able to do before. But I was surprised. I was like, this was not what I saw coming, but I'm into it.
Yeah, and we're all loving it. Like, shout out, you won the British LGBT Awards when I was there last year. It was an incredible moment. I thought it was such a cool thing. And you obviously have mentioned a few times, and I'm low key a little bit obsessed with modeling at the moment because I did watch the Next Top Model documentary not that long ago. You mentioned your modeling career. I'm super curious how you got started in modeling and kind of your career journey there.
Yeah, that was another one of those things that was kind of like a bit of a fluke, I think. And it also kind of connected to just me being again, like, I was, like, a very inconspicuous, invisible kid. As
Mm,
I was not popular, I didn't have a lot of friends to hang out with, so I just had a lot of hobbies. And I'm also an only child, so I was definitely, like, from childhood, just always doing, like, martial arts and gymnastics or football, like, whatever it was. And then I think, I think someone just, like, saw my picture on my mom's desk and was like, "Oh, does she wanna do, like, kitty modeling and stuff?" Like, when I was younger. But then I kind of aged out of it kind of quickly because I was, like, already, like, hitting, like, 16-ish. But I was like, "Oh," but I kind of was, like, that kind of made me intrigued by it, though, like, I hadn't thought about it before. And also as someone that was very into, like and still is into, like, alternative fashion and, like, alternative subculture and, like, heavy metal and stuff, there was a big gap in terms of Black models in that,
mm,
which had kind of made my life harder because people prior to being like, "You don't look asexual," it would always be people, like, judging my style, like, on that basis. So, I kind of, like, was more interested in that area, so all my early work and still a lot of my work now is with brands like Killstar and Disturbia and Cyberdog and, like, all of that, and then because I had, like, double Ds, more appropriate for lingerie than catwalk, so I wouldn't have been against a catwalk, but that's just not my body shape. So,
okay.
kind of also started doing all that. And then, yeah, and then kind of the activism kind of came into it. But yeah, it was just another one of those things where I actually sort of approached it from like, all of the original articles that I wrote were all about, like, representation in fashion and about alternative subculture and, like, Blackness and, like, Gothic settings and all those kind of things. Like, that was, like, what my early writing was about, like, before the asexuality stuff. So, I think that was probably, like, an example of my early interest in this without it
Yeah.
manifesting the same way. It was, like, same energy for sure.
Yeah. And is there a moment from kind of your modeling work you look back on as like such a proud moment or a particular moment you kind of feel such pride about?
I think for me, it's just being able to work with the kind of places that I really liked when I was younger. Like, I remember as a kid,
Yeah.
as someone who, like, didn't live in London, like, I went to Camden Market to get my prom clothes. To get, like, the corset, the tutu, the big boots, all of
Yeah.
that. I remember seeing, like,
Nice.
Cyberdog and being like, "Oh my god, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life." Like, but I never would have thought, like, "Oh, I could, like, shoot for them someday or something." So when I actually did get to do that and I could go on their website and see myself on there, like, in the clothes, I'm like, "Oh, my younger self would never
Yeah.
believe that." Like, I have pictures of my, like, 16-year-old self outside of Cyberdog, like, And even the
That's so
same for,
cool.
like, Ann Summers, like, there's a picture of my teenage self because I thought Ann Summers was so pretty and mysterious.
Yeah.
For some reason as a kid, and there's a picture of me, like, outside of one of their shops when I was, like, 15, and then I got to, like, model for them, like, as an adult, and I'm like those kind of things, like, very much ties back to me satisfying the inner child that would never believe it.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. And it's so nice that you kind of, it's for your inner child, but there'll be so many young people out there who can kind of see themselves reflected and they say, I can achieve these things. And I think because we touched on intersectionality so much, I am curious, and it comes up a lot in this podcast because so many of us have so many different dimensions to our personalities and our identities. How how has the intersection of being a Black asexual woman shaped your experience today?
I mean, I think it's made a big difference because it's kind of one of those, like, minority within a minority
Mm,
experiences. Because I kind of realized, like, right at the beginning, like, oh, being Black is gonna make a difference, not just, like, in life, but also in terms of, like, the asexuality part. Like, my peers in, like, such a kind of bi-curious, queer-friendly all-girls school, it wasn't that they didn't believe in asexuality, they didn't believe in it for me in particular. So,
yeah.
I kind of already clocked the distinction there. And then also again online, like I'm seeing all this stuff, but I'm like, there must be a reason why I'm not seeing any Black people talking about this, why it's only like white kids. And then when I kind of started
Yeah.
doing this work, like I remember like the first kind of documentary I did, they only wanted to put white people in it, and, like, the one that was on asexuality, and then I did, like, another one that we were intentionally aiming to make it more diverse, and, like, it was me and 3 other white people. But when it came to the televised version, they cut me out of it. And I was like,
Wow.
"I'm understanding this now, like, I'm getting it," and, like,
Yeah.
I was still on the online version, and the comments I got compared to the comments that, like, the white asexual people in it got was, like, drastically different. Like, mine were so, like, sexually aggressive and, like, weird
Yeah.
and violent, and, like, everyone else's was just like, "I don't understand that term," and then for me, it was like, "Hope she gets raped and deported," and I'm like, "Okay."
Wow.
Different energy. Again, it's just been a different energy, like, ever since. Like, people just do not interpret it the same way, like, even and also I think just, like, in terms of activism, like, in the scene, as I'm sure you've seen, it's a very I don't think this is just a UK thing, but it's a very, like, white gay scene when it comes down to it, like, in London and beyond, like, if you're talking about who runs the platforms or who's, like, in control of anything, it is kind of one particular demographic, which means that people kind of have that subconscious thing where they're more just inclusive of people that look like them. So even just, like, getting in the room is harder because 'cause I'm like, I'm only gonna
Yeah.
be one of a couple of Black women in there, and Lady Phil's gonna be the other one. So, like, there's there's only so much space, like, it's I think intersectionality is not really a conversation the queer scene's got a hold of very well yet. So, even if I'm just trying to get asexuality in there, I've got the additional hurdle of that I don't fit just as, like, a Black woman. So even getting in proximity to people to tell them about asexuality is hard. And then even trying to organize things, like, within the asexual community, because there's, like, racism there as well. It's a predominantly white community. So,
Mm.
it's just like an extra layer on top of all of the layers, really.
Yeah. And then you know, social media can be such a positive thing in that it allows us to have a platform and to tell our stories. But obviously, as you've just alluded to, the comment section and what can come through can be horrific and really damaging and obviously have a massive impact on people's mental health. How do you protect yourself from that? So how do you continue to be such a positive force for change whilst kind of like knowing that that's the backdrop of it all?
I think, and I mean, this always sounds bad, and I'm not advocating for it, but I do think it was somewhat beneficial that I got bullied in school. And I'm not saying we should bully kids, but I do think that it built, some
Right.
resistance for me. And that was kind of one of the early things when you were like, oh, when did you kind of realize that you had like a knack for it? I was like, like a lot of other people I know that have tried this, once that part starts, or once
Yeah.
it kind of starts getting hard, they're just like immediately burn out, immediately over it. Like I don't get burnout for whatever reason. I don't know why. I don't like it just like it's irritating, but it's not like destructive for me. It kind of rolls off me very easily. I think because I'm also like I'm pretty good at, like, separating it, like, I think outside of, like, people knowing my work in terms of asexuality and modeling and stuff, most people don't know anything else about me, and I'm not against that, like, I'm not one of those
Okay.
like, people don't even know where I live half the time, like, people just assume I'm just in London all the time, like,
Yeah.
people don't know what I do outside of this, or what my interests are, anything, or who my friends are, or and I'm so I kind of feel like I have, like, a Hannah Montana, like, alter ego, sort of, where I can just, like
I love
I can
that.
literally just go back to, like, being totally invisible and, like, conspicuous, like, in my town, and then I go back to, like, the glamour and confusion of London, and then I head back out, and I think it's kind of the same with the internet, like, I'm kinda good at being, like, just drifting off into my own alternate reality, um, and yeah, just, like, going into my own imagination, so I don't know what it is that makes it easier for me to do that, but it kind of makes it more manageable, and then also I feel like I can kind of use myself as a case study because a lot of people don't understand what hatred towards asexual people looks like. Like, I'll have
Yeah.
people be like, "Well, how could anyone be mad at that? What would they even say?" And I'm like, "Here you go. I have many
Yeah.
example." I'm like, I've noticed people have literally used me in, like, essays and stuff as an example, like, as a case study of
Yeah.
these things. So I feel like it can kind of make it useful in terms of, like, raising awareness of what, like, aphobia looks like, so it's not an entirely, like, futile experience.
Yeah. And look, we've come up a lot on this podcast is this idea of your younger self and this idea of being the person you needed when you were younger, the person that's going to think it's so cool that you're achieving all these things. So, as we end the podcast, I want to revisit your younger self. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? And would it be different if I said, what advice would you just give to a young LGBTQIA plus person today?
I think you would be the same actually, because like, what I would say to my younger self would just be, like, "Stay weird." Because was
Yeah.
a lot of pressure not to be, like, it was very counterproductive for many years, but I never conformed, and I feel like if I had done, it would have taken me way longer to get to this stage, and also it's like, it did work out in the end, which it can be kinda hard to think that far ahead when your brain's still, like, developing, but, like, literally, like, I can say that my school bullies follow me on Instagram now, and they think I'm awesome. It's literally that, like, I never changed my style, my interests, I didn't pretend to be
Yeah.
anything else, and people just got over it and got into it. So and I feel like that is kind of how it once you just get out of that intensity of school, there are
Yeah.
so many more, like-minded people out there, you just gotta get through that bit. So, yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. When you're younger, what you feel makes you different is actually what makes you unique, and it's what's gonna be kind of a superpower for you going forward. So I think that's fantastic advice. Yasmin, thank you so much for being on Queer Talk with me. This has been such an interesting conversation, and I just think the work that you're doing is so important. And the more that we can raise awareness and just normalize so many different representations of all parts of the LGBTQ plus community, I think is really, really important. So thank you so much for your work, and thank you so much for being on Queer Talk with me today.
Thank you, thanks for having me.